Are there any clarifications or corrections needed to the minutes? Hearing none. Do we,
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
do you want to make a motion and then?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the August School Board 2023 meetings.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. You want to call the roll on this?
You got Mr. Joyce,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
and Mr. Shackle,
Yes.
and well, Mr. Jones. Keep it as it's, I don't know if you want to. That's the
We're newbies, right? Next is our public comment portion of the meeting. We have a couple of people signed up. The first on the list is Dr. Michaela Spangenberg. Welcome.
Thank you. And welcome to you as well in your new role.
Thank you.
We're very excited to see a new face and we hope that maybe that will help to reinvigorate this process. Up until this point, there have been a lot of concerns because so far, the takeover to date, we have experienced a lot of, let's say, centralization, allegedly for the surface or for the purpose of efficiency. The idea that, to reduce spending and things like that, which is all well and good, but we have lost the why and how of our education system in that our kids are not being educated and our kids cannot read. And I hope, given that other new people coming next, that some of this is starting to change or may change soon. But then there's the question of, will it change soon enough? Because time is of the essence, the school year has already started. And kind of community engagement that we need has not, and I say that, a lot of that is reluctance, because obviously as a member of the community, I love to see when people come out for things, when people engage, but the problem is that if you don't meet people where they're at, they're going to engage with. And so we continue to have, unfortunately, some of the same problems where focus becomes not so much on the why of education, making sure our kids get the skills that they need to lead better lives as adults, keeping kids safe in a school setting, or even the how, which is through self-governance. We've lost a lot of that, definitely. And somehow, some way, we've got to get it back. Otherwise, we're not going to have a school system in a few years. We're not on the right trajectory. And in this process, we have to have, because public education is not just the same as any other education. It's not just, an entity that's being publicly subsidized, especially in our community. And our community has a beautiful legacy of education. We had schools that were internationally recognized. We had schools that created models for education, and we've lost that. We didn't lose it all at once. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, well, the MGT came in and ruined everything, DUAB came in and ruined everything. We were already struggling because of some of the financial changes that had occurred over time and other issues as well. But I think that when the takeover happened, that public part got cut out. And I'd like to see us get back to a place where, especially if we're talking about an end to distress status, especially if we're talking about the idea of an end to takeover, and especially in light of other neighboring school corporations that are now desperately afraid of being taken over themselves, desperately afraid of the kind of pattern that's being set very publicly about school takeovers when we're supposed to be moving away from that. Have we lost sight of why we're educating our kids for the sake of models or ideology or something else? And how do we get back to that? And a big part of that is data. I think some of that is community engagement, but some of it is also how do we build responsiveness back into the system? And responsiveness, part of that's accountability. I think the issue that has come up is that people get afraid of accountability because they think that means admitting that they did something wrong or admitting that things aren't the way they should be. But what it really means, what responsiveness really means, is being able to respond to the data that you're getting in the moment about what's happening. Not being afraid to make changes, not being afraid to go in and critically look at what we're doing. And thank you.
Next on our agenda is Mrs. Tyndall.
Good afternoon. Welcome, Mr. Johnston, to our board.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a tax-paying resident and serious advocate of high-quality, equitable education for every student of Gary, Indiana. DUAB meets about Gary in Indianapolis rather than in Gary at 12:30 CST on a weekday, on a school day. Mr. Johnston and this DUAB board, you expect parents and workers to come to Indianapolis in the middle of the day, miss work, miss school dismissal time, miss caring for children 0 to 3 years of age, miss caring for elderly loved ones, all because this man's supervising body refuses to hold one meeting, one day a month in the one city that has one most serious and critical need to be addressed, and that is the ongoing academic failure of the Gary Community School Corporation. Students at the hands of the managing and governing agencies, MGT, and this board, DUAB. Distress, yes, you are adding to our distress. Further, would you explain for the organizational makeup, manager, assistant manager, chief, explain the 6 principals in 6 years, explain the manager, according to some of our parents, stating that the manager has a 3-day work week in our school system. And I'm not sure of what the assistant manager work week consists of. Explain the manager living not in Gary, but having an Evanston, Illinois, and a Chicago, Illinois residence. Explain the rationale for salaries of $170,000 and $190,000 and bonuses and exorbitant figures with so many children and learning needs not being addressed in a positive way. Explain the bold, blatant practice of nepotism. I am going to pass a packet that I'd like this board to read, and hopefully, would you pass it along, please? Thank you so much. And hopefully, you will have a softened heart, be enlightened, your scope will be broadened, and your role ends in strangling our school system. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you have any extras, I'd like them.
Absolutely. I believe that's all that have signed up for the public comment. Thank you for your comments. Before we move on, you can tell that I'm really a rookie on this particular board today. I was remiss in not introducing our new board member. At the last meeting, it was acknowledged that Rebecca Kubaki was leaving the board and recognized for her service, and we appreciate that. We have an equally capable person who's been appointed to the board, David Holt. I've known David for some time as well, and he is the Chief Operations Officer for the firm Church, Hill and Antrim, I should say, and has was it 10 years as CFO or 20? Well, 22 years as CFO at the Metropolitan School District of Warren Township. Maybe it was only 10 years at Fifth Third Bank. But also in a finance capacity at Fifth Third Bank. So welcome, and we look forward to your contribution here. The next item is the Gary Community School Corporation operations update. We'll turn it over to Dr. Racer.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Exciting things happening in Gary Community Schools. We are now 9 months out from local appointed board control. School board had their first meeting past week. We've turned our public forums into mock school board meetings, give them a year of orientation leading up to. And at our next school board meeting, we're going to be talking about the current state of affairs in the area, looking very deeply into financing, looking into the state of our capital needs across the district. And then what does that look like past the 5-year forecast? You know, what does really a 10-year plan look like? So every year, it's not a fight for solvency. How can we work to get surpluses that continue to increase? Also, do want to talk about some of the recent work that we've had in the community. Last week, we had our first day in the district broadcast that we broadcast in Gary about updates of what's going on in the school district. We have continued to push for enrollment. One of the anomalies that you find in Gary that I've not seen in a lot of other school districts is enrollment continues to happen well a month into school and really up until October. So we're very thankful for the ADM count being October 2nd. So we're continuing to push enrollment. We're out in the community, going to churches on Sunday mornings, sitting outside grocery stores, seeing little children asking, is your child enrolled? And if not, enroll them in Gary schools. We did also hold a community-wide meet and greet for the new school board that happened about a month ago. And then, as I said, we had our first board meeting that I thought was pretty well attended, having attended a lot of board meetings in my here. And then this past weekend, we had homecoming at Westside Leadership Academy, very well attended. All schools participated. A big thing that we're pushing right now is Gary Pride, and really having pride in the school district. There's a lot of allegiances in Gary to the high schools people went to. And one of the things that we're really trying to push is get behind Westside. You know, you may be a Roosevelt graduate, you may be an Emerson graduate, a Horace Mann graduate. Gary Westside is Gary High School. Making sure that we're also being inclusive of everyone while celebrating the traditions and heritage of the past. And then finally, more operationally, we kicked off negotiations next week. Had a very pleasant start to negotiations, which hasn't always been the case in the past. Look forward to successful negotiations and working with the teachers as well as all of our employees to make sure that we're adequately and appropriately compensating them. And then finally, we continue to work to improve transportation. I think I reported on it last month saying, you know, it's a vast improvement over last year. It's just a challenge all over the country right now. And we're getting into very routine status of transportation now, but that's a thing that we're never going to take our finger off the pulse of.
Very good. Any questions for Dr. Agent? Thank you for the update.
Chris?
Yes, go ahead, Ashley.
Speaking of enrollment, do you anticipate an increase over last year, or do you know yet?
My easy answer would be, I don't know yet. We anticipate being somewhere near our fall count. And what last year's fall count was 3,822, and we were hovering just under 3,800 the last, you know. So what, just to go into a little bit more inside baseball detail, we have a student information system that has a little over 4,000 students still in there. What happens, like, if a kid enrolls in another district in Indiana, it flags a conflict with IDOE and they let us know. And we're working to get to get those. And we're also trying to track down the children who not showed. The only thing that happens is a kid moves to Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, we don't get that same flag. So, it's a process of elimination right now, but, I think just managing expectations, we're looking at hopefully holding solid where we were.
Very good. We'll move on to an academic update.
Great.
Mavis?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. So we're kind of at that time of the year. We've talked a lot about last year's data. We've talked a lot about plans for this year. We're still early enough in the year that it's kind of not worth checking progress yet. We hope to start doing that at the next meeting. But I did want to spend a little time today talking about one of the data points that we do use in the district that we haven't really spoken about yet in our tenure, and that's iReady. What I'm going to speak to right now is what we learned from last year's iReady results. And next month, we'll show you kind of our beginning of year iReady for this school year and what our plans are based on that data. But wanted to talk about last year's first while they're wrapping up that beginning of year testing, which is happening currently. So iReady, which is used nationwide. It's kind of unfortunate in Indiana, the name sounds very similar to iLearn and iRead, but it is actually just a separate system completely. It's not state run. But it's a very commonly used diagnostic assessment that's administered to the grades kindergarten through 8 at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year. And whereas a test like iLearn is designed to show grade level proficiency, so they're testing on grade level concepts and skills, iReady is computer adaptive, and it's designed to kind of respond how the student's answering and get down to like exactly where they are currently. So it's more of a growth-based assessment than a proficiency assessment. So we'll see improvements in iReady. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to show up in iLearn, because even if the kid's growing really well, if they started out 3 grade levels behind, they're still not going to pass the bar of proficiency on iLearn. So oftentimes, I know in the past, we've shared iReady data. This happens in a lot of places. We share iReady data. It shows like we're getting really good growth, and then we don't see those same bumps in end of year testing. That's why. 2 metrics that you'll see that we'll talk about in iReady. The first is typical growth. So that is the amount of progress that we expect students to make based on where they scored at the beginning of the year. And that's based on all of the other students who take iReady. They're able to collect a huge amount of data from across the country. So on average, if the kids scored 2 grade levels behind or in a specific spot, how much would we expect them to grow in a year if they're kind of on a normal pace? Stretch is the catch-up number. So their stretch growth goal is if they started out behind, how much growth would it take to get them on track for proficiency? If the student was already proficient, their stretch growth is what would it take to get them to the advanced level? So those are those 2 metrics. We've been using this data for a few years. Teachers analyze the data and use it to form small groups, design which students are going to work with interventionists based on not just who's low, but also specific skills. So it tells us kind of in your pillars of reading, who needs phonemic awareness help, who needs phonics help, who needs comprehension help, things like that. So we use it to design lessons. And then iReady also has computer-based programs that students can engage in. And it's an individualized pathway for them based on how they scored. So we also use that as an intervention program. Go to the next slide. So our reading, we do it in reading and math. And we'll talk first about reading. So this slide shows beginning of year to end of year, last school year, how much growth. So you can see like quite a bit more students are in the mid or above grade level or the early on grade level at the end of year than the beginning of year. Now, we would expect that even if there wasn't anything amazing going on, right? Kids are going to grow. If they're engaging in normal instruction, we expect to see some growth. We did exceed kind of national norms for growth, not by a huge amount, but the median percent progress towards typical growth was 105%. 100% would be kind of your normal amount. So that means 52% of students met their typical growth goals. Again, you would see roughly 50 would be your normal kind of amount. And then 27% of students met their stretch growth goals, which is great. We want to make sure, obviously, we're really focused on remediation in the district because we have a lot of students who are behind, but we want to make sure we're pushing those kids up as well. And I think that shows that we do have some of that happening. Obviously, not as much as we would like, but some good growth. If we compare end of year last year to end of year the year prior, Pete, if you want to go to the next slide. So if we look at spring 23 compared to spring 22, you will see that we have more students performing on grade level at the end of this last year than we did before. So that's showing year over year, we are improving and maintaining some of those gains. Again, it's not a huge amount. I'm not going to pretend it's enormous and we've cracked the code, but there is some good growth there and some momentum to build on. And then I have just a quick overview of where each school lands. They are pretty similar in terms of the amount of growth that you see. There aren't any that kind of jump out as being, way more growth or way less growth than others. I will point out that our middle schools are a real pain point. I think middle schools are often a pain point, but the I-Learn proficiency of both Bailey and Gary Middle is quite low. We did see some really good growth at both of those schools, and in particular at Bailey, they met 147% of progress towards typical growth. So they really are outgrowing your average student. The kids are just very far behind, so we've got to make up a lot more ground. I mean, you can see we had 4 schools, Bailey, Banneker, McCullough, and Glen Park Academy all exceeded 100%, so they kind of outpaced normal growth. Looking at math, just like in all of the data that we look at, it's a similar story in math, but a bit lower. We've struggled with math historically, we can continue to struggle with math. You can see we didn't quite hit that 100% typical growth, we're at 92%. 47% meeting the typical growth goals. So again, not well outside the range of what you would hope to see, but not as high as we would like. And 24% met their stretch growth goals. Same story looking at spring 22 versus spring 23. We're maintaining some of that progress that we're making, but we're still at 24% of kids on grade level, which is not where we want it to be. And school by school, again, we see some growth. You'll notice that at the beginning of the year, we really were not seeing hardly any students on grade level in math. Those are those blue bars. At the school level, there's just very few. And then at the end of the year, we are seeing a little bit more, spike at Banneker, which is great. And again, Bailey, Banneker, and McCullough all exceeded 100% of their typical growth goals. So we've got some good progress going there. Bailey is our STEM middle school, and so they did do some extra training and things around math instruction, which I think we're starting to see the impact of, but we've got a long way to go, particularly in math. Any questions about the hierarchy?
Thank you very much. Moving on to a financial update, we have 3 items that we'll be voting on. Pete, you want to walk us through?
Yeah, the first couple are fairly routine. So all this was done on behalf, and if you want to type anything like that, we could fill on 1065, just for a little background for our new members. This is a state, this is approved by state statute, which is a special program for the area, which allows them to defer come school on payments to go for capital improvements. So this program runs through the end of 2024. There's a total of $26.2 million available, of which the district has spent 18.5 million so far. So that's about 70% of the way, and they have about 7.7 million left to spend for next year. The thing that the board is to approve by statute is the claims docket for every month, just looking at their expenditures. So you see the check that registered there on the last page of 395,000 and showing for the month of August. So that's just to be blessed by the board.
Any questions for Pete on the claims register? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 1065 claims docket.
Is there a second?
Sam.
Do you take it?
Well, I guess if you want me to, if everyone's in person, you can just do.
Yeah, or in person, so, well, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion is adopted. Claims are approved. Next is the,
Who's the second?
Thank you all.
Well,
is the ESSER plan.
yeah, on the ESSER plan, obviously, there's, I forget, 40 million and change, is the ESSER 3 plan. And so, Gary has come to the board most recently in June with revisions to that plan, and anytime there are changes, that's to be approved by the board. There are a couple, contracts that are upcoming. One is later on the agenda that, is a bit more than what was originally anticipated. And then there's another one which I'll likely approve tomorrow, assuming the board approves this, but, some things come in under budget, and so there's, money being moved from some line items to others to cover those two additional expenditures. So the board, you've got in front of you where, 293,000 has been moved from a couple line items to a couple others. And just in order for us to approve contracts, the board has to plus the changes to the plan. Overall.
Any questions on the plan revision? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the revisions to the ESSER plan as presented.
Very good. A motion and a second for Mr. Joyce. Any questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, same sign. Plan revision is approved. Next up is the 2024 budget. We have representatives from the Sender Dalton firm. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, everyone. 2 months ago, we gathered in the same room and we talked about a 5-year financial projection. And we projected that within the next 5 years, we would remain solvent, we would remain balanced and have reserve funds in each of the funds. Now we dig down a little deeper and look at just the calendar year 2024. Each school system needs to have a budget and we approve appropriately, and you may have to remind me how that works. In this specific case, yesterday, a public hearing was held, Tuesday, December 19th, and on Wednesday, October 18th, will there be another meeting at which you will approve the budget? So today, we're reviewing the actions that will be taken by the emergency manager, and you can ask questions as you want to. There can be revisions made, of course, between now and when that budget is approved in October. There was a 10-day notice for the public hearing yesterday, and there is, on that same document, notice of the meeting coming up in October. So we've fulfilled the requirements by way of gateway of advertising the budget through the process for the 2024 calendar year. We really are only looking at 4 funds, the four main funds. We don't look at the federal funds and the ESSER funds; those are all handled individually. We're looking at the 4 funds that need to be approved by the emergency manager that are either property tax backed or basic grant backed in the case of the education fund. Those would be the referendum fund that was approved by the taxpayers, the debt service fund, which uses property taxes to pay the bond payments, the education fund, and the operations fund. I'll go to the first page, which is a summary of the education fund. We tried to use the same template that we used 2 months ago, so we're kind of building off the same format. Proposed budget is just less than $38 million with estimated revenues. The $40 million of revenues are for the most part the basic grant flowing into the state. And then some additional transfers in from the debt service fund on that whole common school loan pause. Those dollars moved from the debt service fund into the education fund, and then they moved to the 1065 fund. So there's a double jump there according to the way we handle those dollars. This budget for this fund, we propose to be in balance. As a matter of fact, it would have a positive surplus of roughly $3 million. It would encompass just less than $28 million in salaries and wages, and those are teachers, education fund-based teachers, and some $1.2 million in miscellaneous. You may note, I'm sure Commissioner, you'll point this out, you may note that we have actually budgeted the full $37 million in the individual line items in the Form 1s. That's because Mike and Daniel are still working on the specifics of the individual line items. They will shrink those line items down to reality, and then they will plug that number in for the transfer on the Form 4 meeting.
Okay.
I'm sure you know that there was a potential question there, and I can find, at least mention that front. We know that we need to shrink that down. There's a little bit of a, on art, even though math should be a science, there's a little bit of an art in making sure that the budget line items match the way we're actually spending money in the individual schools and on the individual teachers and the individual principals. So we're matching those. And as we shrink those individual line items down, we know that we'll be putting that $5.3 million in the transfer line.
Okay.
That speaks to the education fund. Maybe I pause so we can just have questions on any individual fund before I flip to the second slide.
Is that a typo in the ADM account? Because I thought we'd asked that question before, what enrollment was.
I think the difference is that sometimes you refer to ADM including pre-K, and this is the actual non-pre-K number that we use in our financial projections. So we projected both in the 5-year plan and for 2024 flat from last fall.
And we wanted it to be very conservative. So we're budgeting worst case scenario instead of being rosy.
We do feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Kids are in schools. We feel comfortable
Yeah.
that this is a number that we don't need to.
No, this is, we feel very comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our hair is not on fire, even in my case.
Because right now, it's still just a math issue to get the budgets.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the management and
Yeah.
performance issue there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go to operations fund, which is the second slide.
May I ask a quick
Okay.
question on the education fund?
Yes.
This last legislative session, there was some language introduced, actually a bill introduced to change how curriculum materials were charged. A lot of school districts, and there is in some districts, a very negative impact based on programs, technology specific. Can you outline, I'm just not as familiar in Gary, how that changed to really a no charge back to the parents
We believe
is
that
or
it will,
isn't impacting?
we believe will be a negative to the school corporation.
Is there like a dollar amount that you think
We
would?
don't know the dollar amount. I don't know. Do you, Mike?
I don't.
The way that was allowed in the past to use unreimbursed textbooks as a debt service component was more beneficial to the Gary School Corporation than the new no charge will be in the future, but we don't know the exact number.
So it wasn't related to the definition of curriculum materials. It was more of the financing tool issue.
Schools that are financially troubled were in the past able to use the unreimbursed textbook as a benefit. That benefit is no longer available to them. That's fair statement.
Yes, well, and one, not in a position right now to quantify it, but one thing that does help us offset in Gary is the amount of federal funds that we get that can then be spent on curriculum materials. So, that a lot of rural districts in America or in Indiana may not have to their advantage, where a district of our size, has a very high federal fund.
What is the free and reduced count? I'm sure it's,
99 to 100%.
I came from a district that was 85%, so I
Yeah.
understand, the impact of that.
Operations fund? Operations fund pays for everything else, except for the teachers. And it is in every school system I work with, and probably you guys, when you talk to schools, you know the same thing. This is the fund that has the most challenges. It needs as much money as possible from the education fund, in this case, it's capped at 15%. It needs money from the referendum fund, because that's why we issued the referendum, so that it can attempt to pay all its own bills. And in Gary's unique circumstances, because of circuit breaker impact, they are asking for a levy of 30 million, and they will only receive about $3 million. So it is almost entirely wiped out by circuit breaker, because the tax rates are higher in the city of Gary. And so when you're capped at 1, 2, and 3, you're not paying that tax rate, and a lot goes uncollected. So we need to get a lot of other revenues into that operations fund to be able to pay the bills. This is the fund where Mike and Daniel have spent the bulk of their time on future projecting important efficiency measures, cost cutting that will need to go into effect to make that 5-year plan happen. We cannot continue at the same cost components and hit that 5-year goal, we need to make some decisions soon, and Mike's working with the current, the newly appointed board that will be the official board next July, and they've asked that those decisions start being made now, as opposed to waiting until next summer. This budget, brings in $17 million and will spend 19 million, and yes, we know that's a deficit, and yes, that was part of the plan, and we'd like that to be balanced as soon as possible.
So in 25, there will be a significant change with the homestead credit. Then your revenues will decline even further.
That's right.
Have you started projecting what those changes will do and how that will impact your operation?
Are you speaking to the charter school type situation?
No, not necessarily. Go ahead.
He's talking to avoid the supplemental production
Yeah.
amount that is being increased.
Yeah.
So,
On the homesteads?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't think it actually has a huge impact on us, but it is a minor impact on homesteads. To be honest, substantial part of the Gary AB is business, some of the large businesses. But we do have also are concerned about future conversations about sharing of any of the property taxes with the charter schools. Well, the referendum, was another question on operations. Referendum is projected to bring in $10 million. It doesn't have circuit breaker because it's referendum, it's outside of circuit breaker, so it only has some minor seniors type of circuit breaker. Expenditures of 10.3, we try to keep the outgoing the same as the incoming, or at least build up a little bit of reserve so that it can prop up that operations. So if it was gonna bring in 20 million, we'd be pushing more into the operations fund, but we're just pushing what it's bringing. Questions on referendum fund? It doesn't do anything, it just moves money to other places. Debt service fund, the good news with debt service, over your 7 or 8 years involved in having this conversation, debt has been dropping. We've been paying off bonds, and until the 1065 went into place, we were paying off some of the common school loans. So you have less debt, and you have less debt, and you have less payments. So our debt service levy is actually beginning to diminish. And common school levy is also beginning to diminish because those common school loans, even the ones that were paused, no longer have an amortization to them. They ran out. We'll have to talk about the future when those come back into play for various school corporations and how that's handled with the state. But for right now, there's less need to make payments, and therefore less levy, which has a positive effect on the circuit breakers for not only the school corporation, but the surrounding and overlapping units. They will have a smaller tax rate, which means they'll have less circuit breakers. In the long run, if everybody's tax rate is staying down somehow, assessed values going up and circuit breakers coming down, those units can collect a much higher percentage of their levy. Right now, it's very small.
We did common school fund payments get reinstated. 2045.
Rather, six, there you go. And there will be some outlying conversations that will need to happen at that point about how to re-amortize those outstanding paused loans.
And in your budget, you're using a 75% collections rate. Is that actual, or that part's being conservative with your budget?
Close,
Preparation.
pretty close.
Okay.
How are your reserve funds going to change from the end of this year to the end of next year? I've seen them in 4B that was provided.
Well, the fund that I'm looking at the closest is operations, which will lose $2 million. That's the fund that I'm most concerned about, because we don't have a lot of other ways to prop it up outside of the referendum. So that's the fund we need to attack for our cuts, so that we can get that fund back to balance, so it doesn't hit the bottom line reserve.
So what are your totals in your cash reserves?
See.
Ops, we project an ending fund balance of $896,000. The end of this year.
Okay.
I noticed that you're taking the 15% transfer out of education. It's not required to just only take 15%. The districts put on a report that goes above 15%. You know, you had Congress taking more than that to keep that balance.
We have, I think the hope was to wait to do that until operations was depleted. And let the new board be part of that process, since they're the ones that will have their hands slapped on that report.
And we wanted to model also that we can do it without it. And, you know, That does get us, you know, a little lower than we'd like to be, but, you know, I don't think it's a good model solvency through hand slap, you know?
The 15% was created as a benchmark.
Yeah.
I was on that committee. It was a statewide kind of average that was taken. Some districts are being, you know, with any benchmark, they're above.
Yeah.
Below. So I think that if they're 25, it's gonna have to have a lot of discussion, otherwise that fund's gonna be.
Right. A year from now, there'll be a much more important discussion here. So that's my presentation. It was 4 slides. I was trying to keep it high level for you. At least I stayed on track. 2 months ago, I didn't stay on track.
So we're in the middle of the process. We had a public hearing yesterday. We need to take action, do at least take action, and then there'll be another meeting a month or so from now.
As a distressing, we get the opportunity, it's 4 months.
That's why, yeah.
Very cool.
And it's a common principle is you advertise high, everybody does, and then we need to make our cuts, because in this case, if we don't make our cuts, then these guys aren't gonna approve the budget, because there won't be another reserve left. So these two are gonna work on making those cuts, and you'll see a separate set of adopting power will be less, with that transfer by the time it's signed off.
I don't want to merge topics here, but obviously there's both art and science to putting a school budget together. Knowing that we've got a new board, is how are we going to introduce this concept to them? Is that planned as far as rolling that out, their meetings and? You know?
Yes, so we had a board orientation, at the beginning of, middle of August. And Steve attended, we went through the 5-year forecast, very high level of, you know, explain the funds, went high level through the budget. We need to start making decisions sooner or later because they're going to, sooner than later, because they're going to impact next school year. And ideally, if you're going to do something that impacts the next school year, in my experience, January, February, you've got to have those plans in place to start rolling, so it's intentional and not just something we have to do. So October board meeting, the board is going to get briefed with, like I said, the current state of affairs and a nice 5-year forecast. 6 through 10 without changes aren't that nice. And, you know, and they've asked for it. I've been very pleased with the board's engagement around this. You know, we talked a lot about something I've seen a lot of school districts where they just stop spending when they run out of money, which isn't living within a budget, it's stopping spending. And then that creates deferred maintenance and lots of other deficiencies across the district. So it's our intention to recommend some pretty bold moves that I think also are best for children and will improve the ability to provide instruction, potentially increase enrollment. And not going to preview those today because that's something I do want to get in front of the board. I want them to hear it first. But should put us on a path to being able to maintain surpluses into the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
May I make a comment real quick?
You may.
Back in 2014, I was asked of 3 school business officials, and Teresa might even been on that, to go up to Gary and look at the financial situation. And we came back with a report. And I just want to commend all of you because our report said it would take 10 years to get to this type of position. I was maybe at that time skeptical that it could ever get to this particular point. And it's really fulfilling to see where you are today. Thank you.
I looked at the documents that were provided with my budget director, and we don't see any major issues with where it is currently. So
Very good. Thank you for that input. Thank you for having your team do that. What's it? Yep. So we need to vote on the 2024 budget. Is there a motion to approve the budget?
so good.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The budget is approved by the DUAB. Thank you. Next up are some expenses that have been within the purview of the executive director. Pete, do you want to give us an overview of that?
I think we've got a couple of contracts for you. that I approved in the past month. First was with Discovery Education for $69,825. That was paid for out of Title I funds. These are curricular materials for K through 8, I believe, for social studies, elementary, middle school, science and social studies. This is a product that was used last year, and they didn't see that another vendor, so they're satisfied with it and are continuing. And then the second one was with Renaissance. This is some software that works with NTSF, and maybe this will help me out if I need a safety net here, but essentially it tries to look at the whole child. You might have some data over here regarding academics, you might have some data over here regarding attendance or behavioral issues. It tries to combine those things. Total cost is $41,800. This was the effort refund, so the one thing that I had commented with the school was that if this is something that they like, it's kind of a mini flip that they'll have to find another funding source going on forward, because it's just a one-year license. To see if it's something that they get a benefit from. I think that's something that the new leadership will need to consider how it's going to be funded if they want.
Very good. Next up is the West Side Leadership Academy Media Center, the investment there. Hayes?
Yeah, so we're excited about this upgrade out West Side. We've been kind of going through updating media centers and creating maker spaces at a number of our buildings, and West Side is kind of a capstone of that. This will include, we have a large space, so the upgrades will upgrade the library facility, including, furniture, and all the things you would imagine for a library. Then it will also be set up so that it can be used as a full classroom. Actually, there's enough space for multiple classrooms, including the materials for a maker space. We have STEM certified schools at the elementary and middle level, but not yet at the high school. So this is the first step in that direction, so that we can create a full K-12 STEM pathway for kids. So, a lot of the money is going towards remodeling, so we can set it up with these classroom spaces and maker spaces. It's for some of that furniture and shelving for books, and then for the makerspace materials, it will be staffed by 2 librarians. Actually, and that was my question that I need to ask. And we're just excited about, that it can serve both as somewhere that teachers can bring full classes of kids to work with them, and also that kids can come and use it as a library space if you're imagining to study, to do work, to read, and check out books.
And I think you said, this is from ESSER fund. Is that
Yes.
correct? Any questions on this? Is that right? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve this contract as presented.
There's a motion and there's a second. If there are any questions, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. The expense is approved. Thank you. Next, we have contract benchmarks. Can you lead us through this?
So as a part of the state's contract with MDT, there are some incentive-based payments that are measured once a year. So this contract was signed in 2022, so we are assessing what those benchmarks were met for the 22-23 school year. So you've got a summary page that I put together, and then you've got the detail that is given by MDT there. But for year one of the contract, it should be eligible for the $750,000. What's being requested today, and what I would recommend that we approve is $229,000 based on certain benchmarks you see there. the ones that were measurable for the academics, at least, generally in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So there's gradations of that. You'll notice for the island growth scores, it goes down to a student level determined, and we started to think that, and wasn't sure if that was tier 2 or tier 3, but we need a little bit more time, so we'll bring that to the board in the future. You can see that the I read proficiency, scores in tier 2, for the I ready, growth scores, all of those were tier 3 except for the typical adult math is tier 2. Still waiting to hear for graduation rate, which we need to have a nod from DOE to confirm that one. And then all 8 of the forms for last year were conducted, and I was told, and I said, we'll revisit this, but at least for those that we were able to measure now, we wanted to go into.
Any questions for Pete? I spent some time on this, so the footnotes are really the data that's coming from DO. I mean, they're the measurement, they're the ministry of truth, right? I mean, that's of course, right?
For the standard aspects.
Yeah, standard. Right. Very good. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the benchmarks as proposed.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The benchmark and payment on those benchmarks is approved. It's the end of our agenda. Is there any other business that should come before the board today? Hearing none, stand adjourned. Thank you very much.